The Inferno of Nested Complexity. Sing, Calliope mutato of the man of two minds, Aeneas-Quixote, who wandered the labyrinth of counsel. He who advised the advisors and thought himself helper, while binding with bonds he could not see, blind as the Cyclops. Before the sharp stake, before the name that unmade him, sing of the descent through nested circles, through systems that eat their own offspring, through complexities more, where the technical marries the political in darkness. And no divorce is permitted, no annulment granted, only the long unbundling, the patient dismantling, the work of generations, the swear that breaks chains. I begin where our epics begin, in the middle of things, and media's res in the fog of a Washington morning, where the Potomac runs brown with the silt of empires, where the monument's white as bone pierce the low sky, and the man sits in silence in a glass tower. His name on the door, his name in the mouths of ministers, his name a spell that opens the treasuries of nations. They called him technician, advisor, capacity builder, epithet smooth as the marble that lines the World Bank. But I name him truly binder of others while binding himself. He who's so in conditionals that became commands, the Lansdale apprentice, the nested man, the unknowing 30 winters he walked in the halls of the powerful, carrying checklists like shields, like the aspers of Achilles, each box a small victory, each metric a step toward the good, or so he believed, as the Cyclops believes in his cave, as the suitors believed, feasting in Ithaca's halls, not knowing the bow was strung, not knowing the arrow the day of his breaking began, like 3,000 others. Coffee and paper, the financial times folded precisely, the black car, the security pass, the elevators hum, the conference room where the air is recycled and wintry, where the ministers of the South sat in their best suits, the hands folded meek as the hands of suppliants at altars, the eyes downcast, not meeting the eyes of the advisors. Structural reform, he said, and the words were a key, turning in locks he had not installed, opening doors to rooms he had not built, to basements of basements, where the real work was done, where the real hands held levers.
But that day, a woman rose from the table. Not young, not old, but ageless as stone is ageless. As the earth is ageless beneath the plow and the pavement. She wore the cloth of her village, indigo, homespun. And her voice was the voice of the river before dams, the voice of the forest before the concession, the contract. You speak of efficiency, she said, but whose efficiency? You speak of transparency, but transparent as glasses. Glass that we cannot break, glass that we cannot breathe through. You bring your checklists, your steps, your 12-fold process. But we have our own numbers. The number of rivers poisoned, the number of children who learn to forget their own language, the number of grandmothers who die in the shadow of clinics built with your money, your metrics, your measurable outcomes. And Aeneas-Quixote, the nested man, the unknowing, felt for the first time the weight of his own epithets, felt the checklist become stone, become sarks, become flesh, the flesh of his own, binding his own slow entombment. He tried to respond, to deploy the rhetoric of partnership, of ownership, of local, of sustainable, of stakeholder, but the words turned to ash in his mouth, to the ash of burned villages, to the ash of the forest cleared for the carbon credits, to the ash of the pensions that would not be paid, to the ash of the currencies that would not hold value, the ash of the futures he had discounted to present that night. He did not sleep in his apartment of glass, but walked like Orestes walked, like Cain walked through the streets where the homeless built cities of cardboard, through the parks where the statues of liberators stood frozen, their bronze hands extended not in greeting but in demand, perpetually demanding the tribute of the living. And at the river where the Potomac meets the Anacostia, where the waters mingle like capital with labor, he saw her again, the woman, the voice, the accuser, but changed, metamorphosed as of its people were changed. Her body becoming water, becoming river itself, her voice, the voice of all rivers, all damned, all diverted. Her eyes, the eyes of the fish that cannot swim upstream, the salmon blocked by the ladders built for their benefit. You wish to unbind, the river said, but you do not know that binding is all you are, all you have become. To unbind, you must descend, not to hell, for hell is too simple. Hell is for sinners, for the willfully cruel, the deliberate. You must descend to the place where intention is nested in structure, where goodwill becomes its opposite, simply by following steps, by implementing best practice, by believing that management can redeem what management made. And she reached for him with hands that were water, were current, and pulled him down, down through the surface that seemed solid, down through the silt of 300 years of accumulation, down through the layers of policy, of paradigm, of power, down to the first circle. The widest, the most crowded. Here the air is neither hot nor cold, neither bitter nor sweet. Here the light is the gray of a PowerPoint projected in a windowless room at the end of a long corridor. And the souls, they are countless as spreadsheets, as the cells in the matrices that measure development, each soul a consultant, an analyst, a project officer, each convinced of their virtue, their difference, their special exemption from the system they served with such fervor. They sit in ergonomic chairs that adjust to their bodies, but cannot adjust their bodies to the work they have done. They watch presentations that never reach conclusion, the slides advancing forever, the bullet points multiplying, each point spawning sub-points, each sub-point spawning further elaboration in annexes and footnotes and trackers. Aeneas-Quixote knew them, knew their faces, their names, knew the particular odor of their particular coffees, knew the cadence of their self-deprecating humor, the way they said it's complicated as shield and as shroud. Brothers, he called out, sisters of the conditional tense, companions of the caveat, the qualifier, the nuance. Do you not see that your complication is the wall? That your nuance is the mortar that holds the stones? But they could not hear or hearing, could not understand, for their ears were attuned to frequencies of abstraction, to the hum of a server, the ping of the notification, the language of indicators, of benchmarks, of deliverables. And one rose to speak, a man he had trained and mentored, a young man who once believed in the power of evidence, who once thought the data properly presented could liberate. We are not punished, the young man said, only delayed. Our work continues, the presentation will end. The recommendations will be implemented, the outcomes will emerge, measurable, attributable, sustainable. You speak of walls, but we build bridges. You speak of binding, but we facilitate, we enable, we empower.
And
Aeneas-Quixote wept as Priam wept for Hector, not for the dead, but for the living who cannot die, who are trapped in the amber of their own good intentions, preserved forever in the posture of helpfulness. While the help go unhelped, the hungry grow hungrier, and the bridges they build led only to more presentations. The river woman pulled him onward through the gray crowd, past the screens that glowed with the light of eternal process, to the edge where the ground begins to slope, to descend where the air grows warmer than hot, than scorching, where the wind carries sounds that are not sounds of wind, but the howling of currencies, the shrieking of markets, the eternal tornado of capital seeking its home. Here the storm never ceases, the whirlwind of speculation that carries the souls of those who love the foreign more than the domestic, who preferred the abstraction of portfolio returns to the material of their own soil. They are spun like leaves, like the dry leaves of autumn, like the chaff that the wind drives from the threshing floor. And as they spin, they cry out the names of commodities. "Soy!" cries one, and his mouth fills with beans he cannot swallow. "Copper!" cries another, and his hands turn green with oxidation. "Lithium!" cries a third, and her body grows light as the element, rising too high, then falling, then rising, then falling. Never at rest, never possessing what they possessed. Aeneas-Quixote saw among them a man he had advised in the matter of central bank independence, of inflation targeting. A man who had wept with joy when the credit rating improved, who had fired 10,000 teachers to secure the upgrade. "Minister," he called, but the word was wrong, was too generous, for this man had never been minister of his own nation, only the steward of another's extraction, the concierge of the enclave economy, the host of the export zone. "Do you remember?" Aeneas-Quixote shouted against the wind. "The night we celebrated the Moody's announcement? The champagne, the cigars, the feeling that we had arrived. Do you remember the teachers, the nurses, the pensioners, whose lives were the price of that single letter, A minus?" And the comprador spinning, reached out with one hand, and for a moment their eyes met. And in that moment, Aeneas-Quixote saw that the man recognized him, recognized the complicity, the shared participation. But the wind tore him away, up into the vortex, and the moment passed, and the recognition was lost in the eternal pursuit of yield, of spread, of carry. "They are not punished for their wealth," the river woman said, "but for their poverty, the poverty of their desire, which could only want what was denominated elsewhere, which could only value what was valued by others. They are the reverse Midas. Everything they touched turned to gold, and the gold turned to wind, and the wind carries them forever away from what they most wanted, which was only to be wanted, to be valued, to matter." Downward they went, the slope growing steeper, the heat increasing until they came to a valley of vapor, where the air itself was a soup, a pottage of numbers, and the souls were submerged to their necks in boiling software, their hands moving forever over keyboards that melted and reformed like wax, like the years of their lives spent reconciling accounts that would not balance, implementing systems that required more systems, the infinite regression of technical assistance. Here the punishment fits the sin with the precision of a formula, of a function, of a VLOOKUP that finds exactly what it seeks and hides everything else. They had eaten the state, these men and these women, not with the violence of conquest, but with the patience of procurement, of percentage, of the small print that turns public into private with the stroke of a pen. And now they were become what they had made others become. Hybrid creatures, half human and half spreadsheet, their torsos retaining the shape of the bureaucrat. The suit, the badge, the careful neutral expression, but their legs were rows, were columns, were cells without end, extending downward into the boiling SAP implementation, and their voices spoke only in the language of formulas. They cried and value and wrath. Aeneas-Quixote recognized the error codes, had seen them in his own work, in the models that failed, the projections that proved optimistic, the scenarios that did not include the scenario of their own failure. "You built the systems," he said to one who had been a permanent secretary, a man of great discretion. You signed the contracts, you wrote the terms of reference that only they could meet. Did you never wonder why the same names recurred? Why the solutions always required more solutions? And the creature, the bureaucrat spreadsheet, turned to him with eyes that were cells that displayed only values, and spoke in a voice that was the voice of all procurement. We followed procedure, we ensured compliance, we maximized value for money, we were transparent. The auditors found nothing, the ratings were stable. If the system failed, it was not our system. We were only the stewards, we were only the implementers. Aeneas-Quixote understood, as he had not understood. In the world above, that implementation is designed, that there is no innocent execution, no pure administration, that to build the machine is to choose its direction, and to maintain the machine is to ride where it goes. Deeper still, to where the heat was dry, was desiccating, where the air itself seemed to crack like the earth in drought, where the souls were transformed to stone, to wood, to the fixed and ungrowing forms of nature, denied its nature. Here were the great trees, the dendrons of the oligarchy, their roots deep in soil that was not theirs by right, but by the right of the mortgage, the foreclosure, the fence. Their branches reached upward, but not toward the sun. Of their own sky, their own climate, their own season. No. They reached toward markets they could not see, bearing fruit they could not taste, dropping leaves that would not compost where they fell but were exploded. They were Ovid's Daphne, but inverted, perverted. Where Daphne fled the god to become the laurel, these had fled the land to become its masters. And the transformation was not escape but imprisonment, not preservation but petrification, the end of growth. And Aeneas-Quixote walked among them, and the ground was littered with the documents of their possession, the titles, the surveys, the mortgages, the liens, the foreclosures, paper upon paper, each claiming what the last claimed, each debt creating the next debt, the next obligation, until the land itself was only an idea, a line on a map, a color on a screen, an entry in a database, maintained in Singapore, in Delaware, in the city of London. You blocked the land reform, he said to one great oak. You hired the lawyers, you funded the parties, you made the peasants into trespassers on their own history. And now you stand and cannot move and cannot give, and your shade falls on no one or falls on the wrong ones, on the speculators who measure your value in board feet. And the tree groaned as trees groan in winter wind, but whether in acknowledgement or in continued denial, Aeneas-Quixote could not tell, for the language of trees is slow, is ancient, is not the language of checklists. And he had not learned to wait for the answer, to measure time in rings and growth in the patient accumulation of what cannot be harvested annually. The river woman led him to the shore of a river, but this was no river of water, no potamos of life. This was the Styx of liquidity, the flow that drowns, the current of capital that carries all before it and leaves nothing behind. wreckage of nations. And on the shore, the wrathful, the ones who had cursed the IMF while implementing its programs, who had raged against the market while pricing in its favor, who had wept for the poor while designing their poverty. Here the river is not crossed, but fought within. The souls submerged in the violence of their own contradiction, tearing at each other with teeth that are credit ratings, clawing with nails that are conditionalities, biting with jaws that are debt-service ratios. They had been the negotiators, the counterparts, the country teams who faced the missions from Washington, who argued for gentler terms, for longer grace periods, for social safety nets that would catch the falling. And who, when the terms were imposed them with the zeal of the convert, the rigor of the defeated, who proved their worth by exceeding the demands. You could have refused, Aeneas-Quixote cried to them. You could have defaulted, could have devalued, could have torn up the agreements and faced the consequences. Other nations did, other nations do. Why did you choose to be the administrators of your own austerity? And one rose from the water, his face half-eaten by the teeth of his colleagues, his eyes still burning with the anger that had not saved him, that had only made him more useful, more credible, more serious. We thought we were choosing the lesser evil. We thought we were preserving something, some capacity, some future possibility of different choice. We did not know that the choice we made was the last choice. That to accept the terms was to become the terms, to embody them, to carry them in our bodies to this place where we drown in what we once swam. And he sank again, and the river closed over him, and Aeneas-Quixote saw that the water was not water, but the distilled essence of all the documents he had ever signed, all the memos he had written, all the understandings that were not understood, all the agreements that were not agreed, all the consent that was manufactured from necessity. Onward, said the river woman, for you have not seen the heretics, the violent, the fraudulent, the frozen center where the three-faced beast devours the world. And they crossed on the back of a boatman who asked for no coin, for no obol, for no passage fee, only for a signature, consent form, a waiver of liability, of recourse, of the right to return. And Aeneas-Quixote signed as he had always signed, not reading the text, not questioning the terms, for this was the habit of his life, the automatism of the helpful, the useful, the technically competent. Here the air was thick with smoke, but cold smoke, The smoke of ideas that had burned without warmth, of paradigms that had shifted without moving, of ends of history that had not ended. In burning sarcophagi, labeled with their own white papers, lay the creatures of the only possible way. Washington Consensus read one tomb, and the flame was the blue of a gas stove, efficient, controlled. End of history, read another. And the fire was white, was absolute, was the light of no shadow. Doing business, read a third, and the smoke smelled of sulfur, of the match struck to burn. The regulations that protected, the inspections that ensured, the delays that were democracy, the friction that was life. They had not been evil men, these heretics. Not cruel, not greedy, not even particularly ambitious. They had been sincere, which was their greatest heresy. For they had believed that their belief was not belief, but science, but nature, but the way things were. And they had imposed their non-belief with the fervor of those who think themselves free from fervor. Aeneas-Quixote knew them best of all, for he had been their acolyte, their altar boy, their faithful server. At the mass of the market, the communion of growth, he had quoted them, cited them, built his career on the foundations of the burning, the cold burning. I have nothing to say to you, he whispered, for I am you, and you are me, and the fire that consumes you is the fire I carry in my chest. The cold fire of the efficient, the optimal, the best. But the river woman spoke for him, through him. They must hear it from your mouth, not mine. For I am the repressed, the return, the reminder. But you are the perpetrator, the participant, the one who must name what he did before he can undo it. And Aeneas-Quixote spoke, and his voice was the voice of the tombs, of the fire, of the smoke that rose from the burning of futures that would not be born. There were always alternatives. There were always other ways of counting, of measuring, of valuing. We called them inefficient, impractical, impossible, but they were only impossible because we refused to make them possible. Because our possibility required their impossibility, our efficiency required their waste, our growth required their shrinkage. And the flames leaped higher, and the smoke grew thicker. And from the tombs came sounds, not screams, but laughter. The laughter of recognition, of the mirror held up, of the heresy, that heresy is not heresy, but only the name given to those who say no to the religion that calls itself not religion. Beyond the tombs where the cold fire consumed them, the heretics of history's end, the path descended to a vast plain, a pedion of blood and of weeping, where 3 rings enclosed 3 manners of violence. Each ring a deeper wound in the body of nature. Here ran a river, not of water, but of boiling. A phlegethon of weapons, of the arms trades eternal. Commerce. Where the trainers of death squads wandered as wolves, like koi, their coats matted with the blood of those they had taught to kill, their howls, the howls of the manuals they wrote, the curricula they designed. The counterinsurgency that became only insurgency against the people themselves, the counters that would not count. Aeneas-Quixote saw among the wolf pack a face. the daylight world, a general, a partner, a man who had worn the uniform of a sovereign nation, while receiving his salary from another's purse, his doctrine from another's academy, his targets from another's list. The wolf recognized him, or seemed to recognize, and approached with teeth bared, not in attack, but in the grimace of the instructor, the smile of the man who must teach what he knows. You gave us the tools, the wolf said, speaking human, the tools and the framework, the logical lines of effort, the measures of effectiveness, the metrics. You did not pull the trigger, you did not need to. Your hands are clean, are they not? Your conscience clear. You only advised, you only assisted, you only built capacity in the security sector, strengthened institutions, promoted professionalism. The bodies are not on your ledger, the disappeared are not in your reports. And Aeneas-Quixote reached to touch the wolf, to feel the fur that was once the uniform's fabric, but the creature flinched, and the flinch was the flinch of the student who knows the lesson is wrong, but must learn it anyway, must repeat it, must teach it. In turn, the eternal recursion of violence nested in the language of order, of stability, of assistance. I wrote the curriculum, he admitted, the words like stones in his mouth, like the stones of the siege. I chose the case studies, the scenarios, the examples. I made it logical, I made it professional, I made it seem like management, like administration, like the neutral transfer of skills across borders, across cultures, as if killing were a technology like any other, as if the context did not matter, as if the purpose were not inscribed in the method, as if the form could be separated from the content, the how from the why. The wolf howled then, and the howl was the sound of all the manuals burning, all the slide decks dissolving in fire, all the lessons learned unlearning themselves in the heat of recognition of the too late understanding that the lesson was not the lesson, that the learning was the doing was the damage. Here the wood grew thick, but it was not wood. Not living wood. Not the oak or the olive or laurel. But the hyle of the suicidal, the self-consuming. The nations that had eaten themselves in debt. The policies that had devoured their own children. The growth that was cancer. The development that was decay. And from the trees came voices, as from Ovid's Erysichthon, the hungry king who devoured himself, but here multiplied. A forest of hunger, of auto-cannibalism, of the state that privatizes its own future, the nation that mortgages its own sovereignty, the people who vote for their own austerity, believing it virtue, believing it necessary. The necessary self-violence of the responsible, the prudent, the serious, the ones who pay their debts. Aeneas-Quixote touched a trunk and it bled the red of currency of the money that flows outward, always outward, to service, to satisfy, to maintain the credit rating, the market confidence, the invisible hand that grips the throat and squeezes, not in malice, but in the automatic operation of a mechanism, the system, the way things are. We had no choice, the tree said, sap like tears. The markets demanded, the investors required, the alternative was worse. We were told, always worse. Defaultment, I isolation, devaluation, and poverty. And so we chose the poverty of the indebted, the isolation of the integrated, the hunger of the well-fed on paper, the starvation of the measured. And Aeneas-Quixote saw that the roots of these trees were not in soil, but in documents and agreements, in the fine print that grew like mycelium, like fungus through the soil of the possible, poisoning the future, making the present uninhabitable, the past unrecoverable. You advised us to borrow another tree, accused to open, to liberalize, to integrate. You showed us the models, the projections, the scenarios where growth would outpace the interest, where the debt would shrink relative to the expanding pie, the rising tide. You did not show us the scenario where the tide went out, where the pie burned, where the growth was only the burning of the pie itself, the consumption of the seed. And he could not answer, for the answer was in the wood, in the rings of the trees, each ring a year of austerity, each ring a contraction, a compression, a loss of the possible, the imaginable, the capacity to want anything beyond the next payment, the next review, the next certification that the reforms were on track. Here the landscape turned to ice, to the frozen. Waste of the extractivists, the ones who made the world hot. By burning its stored sunlight, its buried forests, its compressed ages, while their own hearts remained cold. Remained calculating, remained frigus, the cold of the rational, the optimal, the net present value that discounted the future to zero, that made the eternal temporary, the sacred profane, the living dead. They were submerged in ice, like Dante's worst sinners. But this ice was the ice of the melted, the risen seas, the permafrost that was no longer permanent, the glacier that retreated, the ice cap that cracked and calved into waters acidified by the same burning that made the fortunes, that funded their foundations, their endowments, their prizes for environmental concern. We did not know they chattered teeth like ice. The science was uncertain, the models disagreed. We were only following the market signals, the prices, the incentives that were given, that were neutral, that were not our making. We were only the agents of the demand, the consumption, the growth that was good, that was measured. That was the measure of all things. But Aeneas-Quixote knew this lie, had told this lie, had written the scenarios where the worst case was never the worst, where the tail risks were trimmed, where the black swan was white, where the collapse was always orderly, always gradual, always manageable by the same tools that make the mess, the same institutions, the same experts, the same 12-step programs applied now to the climate, the biosphere, the living system. That was not a system that could not be managed, only destroyed or preserved, never optimized, never improved. You knew, he said, and the ice cracked with his voice. You knew and you chose not to know, chose to forget, to defer, to discount, to externalize. You made the atmosphere your sewer, the ocean your dump, the future your collateral to be seized when new. And now you freeze in the heat you made, the cool of your own calculation, the ice of your own indifference. And the ice closed over them and they were silent, and the river woman led him onward, downward to the edge of the great descent, the cliff, the fall, into the mail bulge, the evil ditches, the 10 pockets of fraud, where the system consumed its own, where the nested complexity became the nest of snakes.
bridge, a series of bridges, each arching over. A ditch, a pocket, a particular punishment. For the particular fraud of the helpful, the professional. The ones who made the system work by making it seem to work for others. The lubricators of extraction. The translators of power into the language of partnership. Here march the military advisors, the embedded, the ones who wore no uniform but commanded, who sat in the offices of general staffs, whose words were suggestions that could not be refused, whose presence was assistance that was control, help that was hierarchy. They walked backward,
like Orpheus leaving Hades, like the seer Tiresias blind, but their blindness was chosen, was professional, was the blindness of the expert who sees only his specialty, the technician who knows only his tool, the advisor who advises without responsibility, without consequence.
Their heads were turned completely opapelin, facing the past, facing the chaos they had made, but defeat marched forward into more chaos, more advice, more assistance, more of the same, for they could not stop walking, could not stop advising, could only watch what they had done while doing more. Turn around.
Aeneas-Quixote called to them.
See where you go.
Not only where you have been.
The future is in front of you, the past behind. This is the way of mortals, the way of the living.
But they could not hear, or hearing could not obey, for their bodies were bound to the march, to the mission, to the endless advisory presence that was their purpose, their identity, their only form of being in the world. Here the souls were submerged in excrement, in the waste product of their own analysis.
The AAA-rated securities that were jumpy, investment-grade sovereigns that defaulted.
The stable outlooks that destabilized, the watches that never watched, the reviews that were not reviews.
But announcements of decisions already made elsewhere, they wallowed like swine, like Ovid's gluttons transformed, but the transformation was not punishment from outside.
They had chosen this form, had competed for it, had sought the positions, the salaries, the bonuses, for declaring the solvent insolvent, the credit-worthy, untouchable, the promising doomed, all with the authority
of science, of objectivity, of the market's judgment that was not judgment, but only the aggregation of their own declarations, the circular confirmation of the ratings that rated the raiders, the nested self-referentiality of the supposedly external.
We were only the messengers.
They cried from the mire.
We did not make the reality, we only described it.
The market decided, the investors chose.
We merely provided information, transparency, the service of reducing complexity, of making comparable the incomparable, of putting a number on the future.
But the excrement rose, and they swallowed it, choking.
For they could not stop speaking, could not stop justifying,
could only repeat the formulas that had made them,
the methodologies, the models, the assumptions
that were not assumptions,
but only best practice. The practice
that was best for those who practiced it.
Here flew the Simurgs, the golden birds of myth. But their flight was circular, kyclos, without destination, without origin, only the perpetual motion. Between the regulator and the regulated, the treasury and the bank, the agency and the contractor. The public and private that were never separated. Only different costumes for the same actor. Different stages for the same play. The same players. They were beautiful, these birds, their feathers gold, their wings catching the light of the ditches below. But their song was the song of the prospectus, the offering, the pitch deck, the executive summary, the bullet points that promised everything and delivered only the continuation of their own flight, their own circulation, their own existence as the living proof that the system worked, that feature, a lubricant, a necessary mechanism for the transfer of knowledge, of expertise, of the skills that could only be learned in the doing, in the revolving. We brought the private sector perspective, they sang. The efficiency, the innovation, the discipline of the market to the public sphere. We brought the public interest to the private sector, the mission, the purpose, the commitment to service. We were the bridge, the interface, the translation between two worlds that needed each other, that completed each other. But Aeneas-Quixote saw that they were not two worlds, not bridge, but barrier, not translation, but replacement. The public becoming private, the private becoming the only public, the only interest, the only perspective that counted, that could be counted, that could be valued, and the only valuation that mattered. Fourth. Here the souls wore cloaks of lead, heavy bars, painted green, painted with the colors of sustainability, of responsibility, of the governance that was good. The environmental, that was social, that was governance. The three letters that made the destruction palatable, that put the lipstick on the bulldozer, the green on the coal mine, the sustainable on the extraction. They walk slowly, bent beneath the weight of their own marketing, their own frameworks, their own metrics that measured everything except the measuring, that certified everything except the certification, that made the unsustainable sustainable by declaration, by the magic of the acronym, the power of the initial. We are improving the system from within, they groaned. We are making the market work for the good, aligning the incentives, pricing the externalities, creating the business case for the ethical, the profitable for the sustainable. We are not opposing capitalism. We are perfecting it, making it what it could be, what it should be, what it always promised to be, but never was. But the lead crushed them, and the green paint peeled, revealing the lead beneath the heavy metal of the same extraction, the same exploitation. Only now with reporting requirements, with disclosures, with the transparency that was opacity's highest form. Here the souls were submerged in boiling gold, in the liquid metal of the deals they had structured. The concessions, the build, operate transfers, the swaps that swapped the public for the private, the certain. For the contingent, the accountable for the remote, the democratic for the contractual, the citizen for the consumer, the voter for the investor. They had written the contracts that could not be broken, or could be broken only at the cost of the public. The termination clauses that terminated only the public's interest, the force majeure that was, the market's ordinary operation, the arbitration that arbitrated always in the same direction, toward the same outcome, the same transfer, the same enrichment of the rich, the same impoverishment of the possibility of public, of common, of koinon. We created value. They bubbled through the gold. We transferred risk, we brought efficiency, we unlocked the capital that was sleeping, that was waiting for the right structure, the right incentive, the right alignment of interest. We were not the cause of the inequality, we were the neutral mechanism, the legal framework, the level playing field. But the gold burned and they could not climb out, for the walls of the ditch were smooth or contractually smooth, with the smoothness of the agreement that had no exit, no termination, no duration, but only the perpetual present of the payment, the annual fee, the user charge, the revenue stream that flowed forever or until the asset collapsed, and then the public would inherit the ruin, the debt, the obligation to pay for what no longer existed. 6. were crucified, but not on wood, on their own inflation-targeting frameworks. On the crosses of the Taylor rule, the Phillips curve, the natural rate of unemployment that was natural only because they had made it so, had chosen to make it so, to sacrifice the employed, to the stability of prices, the confidence of markets, the credibility that was their only god, their only measure of success, their only metric of virtue. They had designed the mechanisms that removed the monetary from the political, that made the decision about who worked and who starved into a technical adjustment, a calibration, a response to shocks that were never shocking to those who received them, only to those who administered them, who watched the dials and adjusted the levers from the temples of glass. Their independence, that was dependence on the same markets, the same investors, the same confidence that could only be maintained by punishment, by the periodic sacrifice of the wage, the job, the life. We were independent. They croaked through the pain, independent of politics, of pressure of the short-term demands of the moment. We took the long view, the objective view, the view from nowhere that was everywhere, the view that saw the whole economy, not just the parts, not just the workers, the poor, the immediate sufferers of our necessary medicine. But the medicine was the disease, the cure was the cause, and they hung on their frameworks, unable to descend, unable to rise, only to maintain the posture of the responsible, the serious, the credible. While below them the economy they had stabilized, burned, starved, emigrated, died in the stability. Here walk the headless, carrying their own heads, like lanterns, like the lanterns of the heretic. But these heads still spoke, still saw, still processed. The data that the bodies collected, the surveillance, that was total, that was seamless, that was the dream of the panopticon, finally realized, finally perfected. The monitoring of the many by the few, the extraction of the metadata that was the data that was the self. The pattern recognition that recognized only patterns of threat, of dissent, of the deviation from the normal, that was defined by the deviation, that created the threat by identifying it, that made the danger by predicting it, the pre-crime of the algorithm. We provided security, the heads proclaimed. We protected against threat, against terror, against the enemies of the order, the stability, the way of life that was worth protecting, worth any cost, any intrusion, any loss of privacy, of liberty, of the very self that was being protected. We were the shield, the guardian, the watchful eye that never slept, never blinked, never tired of watching. But the bodies stumbled, for they could not see. Where they walked could only follow the direction of the heads that looked backward, that saw only what had been collected, never what was coming, never the future that was not the past. Repetition, the clip, the fall, the ditch that waited for all who walked without looking, who trusted the data. More than the ground, the pattern, more than the person. Democracy, democracy, democracy. Democracy. Here were the flames that spoke, that appeared to be the voice of the people, the will of the masses, the uprising of the oppressed, the spring of nations, but were only the combustion of the foreign, the oxidation of the domestic, the burning of the possible on the altar of the immediate, the strategic, the necessary intervention. They had funded the parties, trained the activists, organized the civil society, the non-governmental that was governmental in all but name, the independent that was dependent on the continuation of the funding, the sustainable that was sustainable only as long as the checks cleared, the reports satisfied, the outcomes matched the log frame, the theory of change that changed only the government, never the governance, only the faces in the offices, never the what they touched, and the voices they amplified were only the voices that could speak the language of the grand application, the proposal, the evaluation, the language that was already the language of the funder, the agenda of the donor, the democracy that was the promotion of the donor's interest, the regime change that was the preservation of the deeper regime, the international, the nested. Here were the giants, buried to their waists in ice. Their tears flowing down to form the rivers below. The Acheron, the Styx, the Phlegethon, the Cocytus, all flowing from their weeping, their perpetual regret, their endless sorrow at what they had failed to prevent, to mitigate, to compensate, to restore. They had written the policies, the safeguards, the standards that were supposed to protect, to ensure that development did not harm, did not displace, did not destroy, but they had written them knowing they would not be enforced. Or enforced only selectively, only against the weak, only when the powerful did not object, when the project was not too important, too strategic, too big to fail, too big to be bound by the safeguards they had written. We tried. The giants wept. We tried to make the system better, to bend the arc toward justice, to ensure that the poor were not made poorer, that the environment was not destroyed, that the indigenous were consulted, that the women were included, that the vulnerable were protected. We wrote the words, we created the categories, we measured the impacts. But the tears froze, and the ice rose, and they could not free themselves, could only weep more, freeze more. For the safeguards were not designed to save, but to permit, to allow the destruction to continue, with documentation, with mitigation plans, with compensation schemes that compensated only the compensable, the measurable, the loss that could be valued in the currency of the loss maker. Here were the lepers, their flesh falling from their bones, their forms indistinguishable from the documents they had forged, the locally owned strategies that were written in Washington, the country led. Processes that were led by the consultants, the stakeholder. Consultations that consulted only the stakeholders, the ones who held the stakes, the claims, the liens, not the ones who were staked, claimed, encumbered. They had mastered the language of the local, the indigenous, the participatory, the community-based, the bottom-up, while designing the top-down, the external, the imposed, making the imposition appear as the emergence, the foreign as the domestic, the control of the autonomy, the binding as the liberation, the nested as the free. We gave them what they wanted. The lepers rasp, the appearance of ownership, the form of participation, the satisfaction of the checklist, the box tick, the criteria met, the evaluation passed. We were the facilitators, the enablers, the ones who made the impossible possible, the imposed acceptable, the external internal, the foreign familiar. But their flesh was the paper they had written on. The skin of the reports, the muscle of the log frames, the bone of the theories of change that had changed. Only the theory, never the practice, never the power. And as they decayed, they became only more like what they had made. The undead documents, the zombie processes that walked without life, owned without owners, participated without participants, developed without development. Beyond the tentage, the path descended further to the frozen center, the lake of the treacherous, where the ice was thick and the cold absolute, where the three-faced beast devoured the world.
Here was no fire, No heat, no warmth of any kind. Only the ice of the liquidity trap, the frozen assets. The immobilized capital. The system that had become too complex to move, too nested to change, too interconnected to fail, and therefore doomed to persist, to continue to devour itself. And the world in the cold fire of its own necessity. At the center, Lucifer Swift, the three-faced beast, not evil but structure, not fallen but founded, the foundation of the system, the ground of the nesting, the clearing house through which all clearing passed. His three faces. The red, devouring the global south, the face of the Fed, of the dollar, of the signature, the privilege of the printer, the issuer, the center, the white, devouring Europe, the face of the ECB, of the technocratic, the independent, the above politics, that was the highest politics, the imperial without empire. The yellow-black, devouring the future, the face of the BIS, of Basel, of the coordination of central banks, the bank of banks, the nesting itself, the center that held because it was the center, the gravity well of global finance. And from his three mouths, three winds blew, not hot but cold, the winds of the carry trade, the arbitrage, the perpetual motion of capital, seeking yield, seeking safety, seeking the center, the vortex that was not malicious but only mathematical. Only the aggregation of individual rationalities that made the collective irrationality, the general madness that was the sum of sane decisions. Aeneas-Quixote stood before the beast and felt no fear, only recognition, only the understanding that this was not the enemy, not the adversary, not the villain of the piece, but the structure itself, the system that had no author, no designer, no master, only the emergent property of all the actors, all the advisors, all the consultants, all the helpers, all the well-intentioned, all the professional, all the nested. You are not a god, he said to the frozen giant. You are not a devil. You are only the ice that forms when water seeks its level, the crystal that grows when the conditions are right, the pattern that emerges from the interaction of the molecules, the individuals, the nations, the flows, and the stocks. Passive treason. You have no will. You have no desire. You only are. Because we made you. Because we continue to make you. With every transaction, every decision. Every yes that we think is only local, only small, only insignificant in the vastness of your scale. And the beast did not answer, could not answer, for it was not a speaker, only a spoken. Not a subject, but an object, the object of all the subjects who denied their subjectivity, who said, we had no choice. We were only following. We were only advising. We were only implementing. The voice of the act of destruction, the abdication that was the highest assumption of power, the denial that was the deepest assertion. But the river woman spoke. Climb him. Not to conquer, not to destroy, not to replace one center with another, one beast with a better beast, one system with a more humane system. Climb him to descend, to go through, to emerge on the other side, where the ice gives way, where the gravity shifts, where the swerve begins, the clean amend that breaks the chain, the fall that is not falling but flying, the descent that becomes ascent, the end that is beginning. And Aeneas Aeneas-Quixote climbed not on the body of the beast, but on the ice itself. The frozen tears, the crystallized regrets, the solidified suffering of all the circles below, using the very structure as the ladder out of structure, the nesting as the tool of unbundling, the complex as the path to simplicity. And at the top he did not look back, non-retro, for to look back would be to become the pillar of salt, the frozen figure, the consultant who could only advise, only assist, only help to perpetuate. He looked forward into the dark that was not the dark of the inferno, but the dark of the not yet the possible, the unmade, the free, and he fell or flew or swerved cleaner men through the center of the earth, through the void that was not empty but full of potential, and emerged not in the same world but another, not in the same time but the time of the transition, the interregnum, the between of the no longer and the not yet, the shore of the mountain that was not hell but not heaven, the purgatorio of the active, the working, the patient, unbundling. The first canto, the Inferno of nested complexity, the soul of Aeneas-Quixote, having descended through all circles of the system that was not malfunction but function, emerges on the shores of the second canto, where the work of unbecoming begins, where the climb is long but the direction is clear, where the end is not the end, but the turning, the conversion, the revolution that is return, not to the same, but to the possible, not to the origin, but to the beginning.
Purgatorial of Unbundling, invocation of the muse of the middle, the between, the becoming. Sing now, Calliope praxis of the mountain that rises from the sea where the inferno disgorged its pilgrim. Not the mountain of conquest of Zeus defeating the titans, of the strong imposing order on chaos, but the mountain of patience, of the slow undoing, the active passivity of the one who works to dismantle what he was, to unbecome what he made, to climb through the terraces, not by strength but by yielding, not by knowing but by learning, the unlearning. Sing of the guide who cannot guide to the summit, the shade of the economist who died mid-conversion, his resignation letter unfinished, his hand still poised above the signature that would have freed him. Virgil mutato, the changed who is still changing, the sufficient but not necessary, the provisional authority who knows his own provisionality, who speaks in the conditional, the subjunctive that we would have, and if only and perhaps, the mood of the possible, the tense of the transition. I begin where the last canto ended, on the shore of the island mountain, the Nessos that is not a destination but a direction, not a place but a process, the kinesis of the purified, the active purification that is not suffering inflicted but suffering accepted, chosen, worked. The sea behind was the sea of the frozen, the lake of Lucifer, swift, the absolute, nesting that was its own punishment, its own imprisonment, and beach of the delayed, the beach of those who died suddenly in program reviews and coups and unexpected crises that were the only expected outcome of the system they served. Purgatory, the beach of delayed repentance. Here the souls waited, watching the tide of capital flow in and out, the eternal respiration of the liquidity that breathes through the world, inhaling the surplus, exhaling the debt, the rhythm that measures the time of the global, the time that is not human but financial, not seasonal but fiscal, not cyclical but spiral, the same and not the same, the eternal return of the different same, the changed repetition. They had died suddenly, these waiters on the shore, in the middle of the mission, the project, the reform. Before they could complete, could evaluate, could learn the lessons that would have justified the suffering, the best practices that would have emerged from the failure, the knowledge products that would have captured the learning for the next iteration, the next country, the next generation of the advised, the assisted, the developed.
We were not finished, they said to Aeneas-Quixote. Our work was incomplete, the sustainability was not assured, the exit strategy was not implemented, the handover was not smooth. We need more time, more resources, more commitment from the counterparts, the government, the beneficiaries. We need to go back to finish, to close out properly, professionally, according to the guidelines. But the tide went out, and the tide came in, and they remained unable to go back, unable to go forward, caught in the delay of their own delay, the postponement of the recognition that the completion was not completion but continuation, the handover, the extension of the hand that grips, that holds, that does not let go. Even in the letting go, Virgil, mute title, spoke to them. His voice, the voice of one who had also waited, who was still waiting, who would wait forever on the threshold of the change that comes too late, that comes after the death that should have been the end, but was only the transformation into another form of waiting. The delay is the lesson, the waiting is the work, the recognition that you cannot finish, cannot complete, cannot close out is the beginning of the opening, the unclosing, the unfinishing. That is the condition of the possible, the not yet, that is the only time of the transition. We died in the middle, but the middle is where we live, where we work, where we climb. There is no end to the project, there is only the next step, the next breath, the next unbundling of the nest, the next loosening of the grip that grips, even the hand that grips. And some among the delayed heard and began to move, to walk along the shore, not toward the mountain yet, but along the edge, the margin, the beach that is the boundary between the frozen and the rising, the sea and the land, the done and the doing, the completed and the becoming. The gate of the purgatory proper stood open, not locked like the gate of the inferno, not guarded by the angel with the sword, but open, anoic memos. For the will to enter is the first step of the climb, the choice to suffer actively, to work the unworking, to climb by descending into the self, to rise by falling upward by the paradox of the active passion, the pathos that is not endured but embraced above the gate. The words not abandon hope, but hope is the work is hope, the hope that is not expectation but direction, not prediction but commitment, not the faith that the summit will be reached, but the faith that the climbing is the summit, that the direction is the destination, the process is the product. And Aeneas-Quixote passed through, and the gate did not close behind him, for the purgatory is not exclusive, not the place of the few, but of the many, the potential many, all who choose to climb, to work, to unbecome.
Here the souls carried stones, great stones, lithoi, carved with the words of their own policy recommendations, the reports they had written, the frameworks they had designed, the strategies they had developed, the visions that had been only their own vision imposed, projected, nested in the institutions they had strengthened. They walked bent double, like the old, like the broken. But these were not the old, not the broken by time, but the powerful, the advisors, the architects of the systems that now crush them. The weight, their own expertise, their own certainty, their own pride in the objectivity that was only the subjectivity of the powerful, the neutrality that was only the alignment with the aligned, the professionalism that was only the discipline of the discipline, the best practice that was only the practice of the best, the richest, the most. Aeneas-Quixote knew this weight had carried this stone, was still carrying it, would carry it up the terrace, around the mountain, until the stone became light, became transparent, became glass, hyalos through which others could see what had been hidden. The assumptions, the interests, the nesting of the nested, the complexity that was not complex but only complicated, not emergent but designed, not inevitable but chosen by them, by him, by all who had bent the world to their understanding. I thought I knew, he said to Virgil Mutato. I thought my knowledge was service, was help, was the transfer of what I had learned to those who had not learned it. The gift of the developed to the developing, the modern to the traditional, the efficient to the wasteful, the rational to the emotional, the global to the local. I thought I was bringing light. I was bringing only the shadow of my own blindness, the darkness of my own limited light, the nesting of my own perspective in the universal, the particular in the general, the interested in the objective. And Virgil Mutato answered, his voice, the voice of the conditional, the incomplete, the becoming. The stone lightens as you speak, as you name what it is, as you make visible the invisible nesting. The pride that is not pride in self, but pride in system, in structure, in the invisible hand that was your hand, the market that was your preference, the efficiency that was your value. Carry it further, speak more. The transparency you demanded of others, practice on yourself. And they walked, and the terrace curved upward, and the souls they passed began to speak, to tell their stories, the particular stories of the general failure, the individual paths of the structural sin, And as they spoke, their stones grew lighter, began to glow, to become phaedrals, bright, not with their own light, but with the light of the recognition, the acknowledgement, the yes. I did this, I made this, I am responsible for what I could not control, but chose to serve. At the top of the terrace, the angel of humility, not with sword, but with sponge, with water, with a washing that is not punishment, but relief. The removal of the weight, the lightning that allows the next step, the next terrace, the next unbundling of the nest itself. You are not humble yet, the angel said, but you are learning the practice of humility, the active unlearning of the expertise that was the barrier to knowledge, the knowing, that prevented learning. Go upward, the stone will return, will become heavier before it becomes lighter again. For the work is not linear, not progressive, not developmental, but spiral, recursive, returning to the same with difference. Souls walked in darkness, not the darkness of the infernal, not the absence of light, but the chosen darkness, the self-imposed blindness, the eyes sewn shut with the wire of their own surveillance, the wire that had connected them to the markets, to the information, to the flow of data that was their addiction, their obsession. The envy that was not of others' goods, but of others' metrics, others' rankings, others' credit ratings, the relative position. In the hierarchy of the credit-worthy, the investable, the emerging that never emerged, the frontier that was always receding, always beyond. They had been the comparators, the benchmarkers, the ones who measured their own success by the success of others, who defined development as convergence, as catching up, as becoming. Like the developed, the advanced, the mature, who envied not the happiness of others, but their GDP, their growth rate, their market capitalization, the abstract numbers that were the only numbers that counted, the only measures that mattered, the only metrics that made the metric of the human. I could not see my own soil, one spoke, a former minister of the economy, the dismal. I could only see the screens, the indicators, the dashboards that told me what I was by telling me what others were. The relative position, the distance to the frontier, the gap that was not to be closed but maintained. For the gap was the condition of the assistance, the inequality, the justification of the aid, the underdevelopment that made the development possible, necessary, perpetual, the endless becoming that never became, the transition that was not to a destination but to another transition, the permanent temporariness of the always developed and never developed. And an Aeneas-Quixote walked among them, blind like them, for he had also envied, had also measured his worth by the worth of others, had also sought the recognition of the recognizers, the validation of the validators, the credit of the creditors, the approval of the approved. But Virgil Mutato guided him, and he guided others, and in the guiding found the first glimmer of the light that was not the light of the screen, the indicator, the metric, but the light of the material, the particular, the soil, the body, the unmeasured, the unmeasurable touch. Virgil Mutato instructed, touch what you cannot see. Learn the world through the hand, through the skin, through the senses that was suppressed by the vision that was not vision, but only the scanning of the data, the process processing of the information. The envied is not the enemy. The comparator is not the competitor. The metric is not the measure. Touch the stone, touch the soil, touch the face of the other, who is not other but neighbor, not competitor but companion, not benchmark but being, existing, living in the unranked world that is always here, always now, always enough, sufficient, hekanos, the enough that is the end of envy, the beginning of solidarity. And as they touched the wire, loosened, the eyes began to see not the glare of the market, but the glow of the particular, the uncomparable, the unique that is not unique in the sense of the exceptional, the superior, but unique in the sense of the unrepeatable, the irreplicable, the local that is not local in the sense of the limited, the backward, the incomplete, but local in the sense of the rooted, the place, the depose that is not the position in the hierarchy, but the ground of the being, the where of the who, the there of the here, the material of the meaning. The material of the meaning.
Here the souls walked in smoke, not the smoke of the inferno, not the smoke of the burning, of the heretics, the violent, the fraudulent, but the smoke of their own former rage. The revolutionaries who became what they fought, the reformers who were reformed by the reform, the changers who were changed into the instruments of the change they had opposed, the resistance that became the assistance, the opposition, that became the position, the critical, that became the critical mass of the same. They had been the country teams, the counterparts, the local ownership that owned only the ownership of the foreign, the stakeholders who held only the stakes that impaled them, the partners who partnered only with the partnership that was not partnership, but penetration, not collaboration, but co-optation, not solidarity, but subordination, the nested complexity of the apparently independent. We were angry, they said, the smoke in their lungs. We raged against the IMF, against the conditionalities, against the structural adjustments that adjusted only the structures of our own oppression. We raged against the World Bank, against the projects that projected only the power of the projector. We raged against the consultants, the advisors, the Lansdale apparatus that was the apparatus of our own advice, our own assistance, our own capacity building that built only the capacity to be assisted, to be advised, to be built. But the rage had not saved them, had not freed them, had only made them more useful, more credible, more serious. The responsible opposition that opposed only to better assist, to better advise, to better implement what they had raged against. The rage becoming the fuel of the same fire that consumed them, the smoke of their own burning becoming the atmosphere they breathed, the condition of their existence, the air of the reform that reformed only the reformers. Your rage was just, Virgil Mutato said. But justice is not enough. The target of rage must be not the person, but the position, not the advisor, but the advice, not the consultant, but the consultation, not the individual, but the individual as the instance of the structural against the nesting, not the nested. Rage against the complexity, not the complex. Rage against the system, but rage strategically targeting not the replaceable parts, but the irreplaceable relations, the bonds that bind, the links that link, the connections that make the disconnection possible, necessary. The unbundling that is the work of the patient, the long, the generational, the work that outlasts the rage, that starts it, that transforms the rage into the persistence, the stubbornness, the hoopamone of the ones who do not forget, who do not forgive, but who do not replicate, who do not become the mirror of what they oppose, the image of the image, the shadow of the shadow. And the smoke began to clear, not because the fire was extinguished, but because the fire was directed, focused, targeted no longer. The conflagration that consumed the consumer, but the forge that shaped the tool, the kiln that fired the vessel, the controlled burn that cleared the field for the new planting, the new growth, the new possibility that grows only from the ash of the old, the destruction that is not destruction, but preparation, not ending but beginning, not death but transition. Here the souls ran, not the flight of the fearful, not the pursuit of the desirable, but the running. That is the avoidance of the stillness, the movement. That is the prevention of the rest, the perpetual motion. That is the denial of the position. The capacity builders who built only the capacity to build capacity, the trainers of trainers, who trained only the training, the development, professionals who professionalized only the profession, the infinite regress of the active, avoidance of the act, the busyness of the non-busy, the work of the non-work, the labor of the avoidance. We were always preparing, they gasped, running, preparing the study, the assessment, the framework, the strategy, the plan, the roadmap, the pathway, the theory of change that changed only the theory, the logical framework that framed only the logic of the framework, the monitoring that monitored only the monitoring, the evaluation that evaluated only the evaluation, the learning that learned only the learning, the knowledge that knew only the knowledge, the capacity that capacitated only the capacity, the development that developed only the development, the endless becoming that never became, the permanent preparation that prevented the event, the action, the doing. And Aeneas-Quixote ran with them, for he knew this running had spent his life in this running, the avoidance of the stillness where the truth might speak, where the recognition might come, where the I might emerge from the we of the project, the us of the mission, the team of the assistants, the collective that was not collective but only the aggregation of the avoiders, the group that was not group but only the sum of the runners. But Virgil Mutado stopped him, placed his hand, the hand of the shade, the insubstantial, the conditional on his shoulder, and the touch was the touch of the possible, the might be, the could be, the subjunctive that is the mood of the transition, the grammar of the not yet, the syntax of the becoming. Stop, stand still, let the others run past. The sloth is not in the
running, but in the refusal to stop running. The avoidance of the position, the place, the stand, the taking of the stand. That is the condition of the action, the real action, not the pseudo-action of the preparation, the pseudo-preparation of the action that never comes.
Stand here, breathe. Let the truth of your life speak to you, not in the language of the project, the proposal, the plan, but in the language of the body, the breath, the heartbeat that beats. Not for the deadline, the deliverable, the milestone, but for the living, the being, the existing, in the present that is not the present of the PowerPoint, the slide, the presentation, the present of the presence, the gift of the given, the door-on of the now that is always now, always here, always the only time of the real change. The change is the changer, the transformation that transforms the transformer, the unbundling that begins with the self, the nested self. The self that is not self, but only the role, the function, the position in the structure that structures even the structure. The meta that is not beyond, but only the same, repeated. The recursion that is the trap, the labyrinth. That is the mind that must be still to find the thread, the way, the exit that is not exit, but transformation. Not leaving but arriving. And Aeneas-Quixote stopped, stood, breathed, and the world did not end. The project did not fail, the mission did not collapse, for there was no project, no mission, only the running that had stopped, the preparation that was over, the beginning that was always beginning, the start that was always starting, the arc that was not origin but only the first step, the step that is always first, always new, always the step into the unknown, the unmapped, the territory that is not territory but only the moving, the becoming, the unbundled self that is not self but only the process of the unbundling. The work of the work, the labor of the laboring, the energy of the intelligea, the actualization that is not end but only the continuous actualizing, the making actual of the possible, the making possible of the actual, the spiral that is not circle but only the rising that returns to the same at the higher level, the dialectic that is not synthesis but only the ongoing, the permanent, the revolutionary revolution that is not event but process, not seizure but construction, not taking but making, the making of the makers, the building of the builders, the creation of the creators who create not the product but the creating, not the capacity but the capacitating, not the development but the developing, the infinite, the eternal, the apiron of the becoming. Here ends the first half of the second canto, the soul of Aeneas-Quixote, having begun the active work of unbundling, the patient dismantling of the nested self, stands on the fourth terrace, having stopped the running, having found the stillness that is the condition of the real movement, the real change, the real revolution that is the revolution of the everyday, the transformation that transforms the transformer before
curses, avarice, gluttony, lust, the sins of the possessing, the consuming, the penetrating, and beyond them, the earthly paradise, the threshold of the threshold, the Matilda Autonomia, who is not guide, but the swerve itself, the clinamen, the break that breaks into the third canto, the paradise, not of the passive, but of the active, not of the received, but of the constructed, not of the given, but of the taken and made.
Here the souls lay flat, faces pressed to the stone, not in worship, but in the weight of their own accumulation. The bureaucrat capitalist who had converted authority into contract, position into procurement, the state into the private, the public into the personal, they had not stolen. Not in the manner of thieves, not with the violence of the robber, the bandit, but with the pen, the signature, the public-private partnership that partnered only the private, the competitive bidding that competed only to exclude, the transparency that transparently favored the favored, the level playing field that leveled only the obstacles to their own advancement, their own enrichment, their own. Reproduction is the class that reproduced itself through the reproduction of the system that required their mediation, their translation, their necessary corruption that was not corruption, but only the normal operation of the normal system. We maximized value. They whispered to the stone. We ensured efficiency. We reduced waste. We brought private sector discipline to the public sector. We monetized the non-monetized. We captured the value that was leaking, escaping, unpriced. We were the agents of modernization, of reform, of the transition to the market that was not the market, but only our market, our network, our connections, our capacity to navigate the complexity that we had made complex, the nesting that we had nested, the system that required our expertise to function, our mediation to connect, our translation to make the foreign familiar, the global local. But the stone was cold and the weight was real. The weight of the contracts they had signed, the percentages they had taken, the commissions that commissioned only their own commission, the facilitation fees that facilitated only their own facility, their own ease, their own smooth passage through the rough terrain they had made rough, the obstacles they had placed to require their removal, the problems they had made to sell the solutions, the needs they had manufactured to satisfy with their own products, their own services, their own indispensability. Aeneas-Quixote walked among them, stepped carefully over the outstretched hands, the grasping fingers that still reached even in prostration for the passing corn, the opportunity, the entry point for the project, the leverage for the intervention, the buy-in. That was not commitment, but only the purchase, the own, the possessed. I wrote those contracts, he said to Virgil Mutato. I designed those frameworks, I made the possible impossible, so that my assistance would be necessary. My advice required my presence, the condition of the advancement, the approval, the release of the funds that were not paid, but only the advance of the debt, the preparation of the obligation, the creation of the need that would perpetuate the needing, the assisted that would perpetuate the assisting, the endless cycle of the helpful, the useful, the used. And Virgil Mutato answered, the stone teaches, the ground speaks, the prostration is the position from which to see what the standing obscures, the foundation, the base, the material beneath the abstraction, the real beneath the report, the body beneath the indicator. Stay here, learn the language of the stone, the grammar of the ground, the syntax of the soil. The avarice is not of money but of meaning, the accumulation not of wealth but of the words that substitute for the world, the metrics that replace the material, the frameworks that frame only themselves, the circular self-reference of the self-referential. And Aeneas-Quixote lay down, not in punishment, but in learning, in the active acceptance of the position that was not his position, the place that was not his place, the ground that was not his ground, but the ground of all, the common, the koinos, the shared foundation that the avaricious had privatized, had enclosed, had made their own through the magic of the document, the deed, the title, the legal fiction that was not fictional, but only too real. The real violence of the abstract, the concrete consequence of the conceptual, the material effect of the immaterial, the stone beneath the paper that claimed to own the stone.
Here the soul stood in a garden, surrounded by fruit, by grain, by the abundance of the harvest. But they could not eat, for the food was not theirs, was destined for export, for the market, for the price that was not the price of nourishment but of profit. The commodity that was not food but only the commodity, the fetish, the chromatistike, that subordinated the oikonomia, the household management, to the unlimited accumulation of the unlimited, the growth without growth, the expansion without expansion, the more that was always more but never enough. There were the hacienderos, the plantation lords, the descendants of the conquest, the inheritors of the theft, the beneficiaries of the reform that reformed only the form but not the substance, the land reform that redistributed only the paper, while the land remained concentrated, the water remained controlled, the seed remained patented, the market remained distant, the price remained low, the labor remained cheap, the profit remained high, the export remained the imperative, the foreign remained the destination, the domestic remained the source but not the site of consumption. We fed the world, they said mouths dry. We produced efficiency, we achieved scale. We applied the technology, the chemistry, the biology of the modern, the scientific, the improved. We replaced the primitive, the tradition, the backward with the advanced, the developed, the productive. We were the agents of progress, the carriers of the green revolution, the white revolution, the ever-revolving revolution that revolved only around the same center, the same concentration, the same extraction, the same transfer of the surplus outward, the same importation of the deficit inward. But the garden withered around them, not from the lack of water, but from the lack of the local, the rooted, the topos that was not the node in the global network, but the place of the living, the eating, the tasting, the juices that was not the consumption of the commodity, but the communion of the communal, the shared meal, the deepening that was not the transaction, but the gift, the doron that established the bond, the philia, the friendship that was not the networking, but the loving, the caring, the being with that was the condition of the being, the ground of the self that was not the self-made, but the given, the received, the inherited, the transmitted. Aeneas-Quixote tasted the fruit or tried to taste, but the taste was not there, was only the idea of the taste, the nutritional content, the caloric value, the vitamin percentage, the metric that measured what could not be measured, the quality that was not quantity, the experience that was not efficiency, the pleasure that was not productivity.
because you overproduce. Virgil Mutato said, "The gluttony is not of eating, but of selling, not of consumption, but of the prevention of consumption. The hoarding that is not hoarding, but only the market logic, the price mechanism that makes the hungry starve amidst the plenty, the thirsty thirst amidst the flood, the needy need amidst the excess. The correction is not to eat more, but to eat differently, not to consume more, but to consume locally, not to import the distant, but to value the near, the present, the parentos, that is the gift of the present, the time of the timing, that is not the deadline, but the season, the harvest, the ripeness that cannot be rushed, the patience, that is the virtue of the peasant, the hormone that outlasts the market, the persistence that persists when the price has fallen, when the buyer has departed, when the export has failed and the local remains, the remnant, the residue, the resource of the resistance, the ground of the alternative. And the souls began to plant not the monocrop of the market, but the polyculture of the subsistence, not the hybrid of the patent, but the heirloom of the heritage, not the chemical of the factory, but the organic of the compost, the cycle that cycled without the external input, the closed loop that closed against the open market, the self-sufficiency that sufficed without the surplus, the enough that was enough. Hear the fire burn, but not the fire of the inferno. Not the fire that consumed, that destroyed, that punished, but the fire that refined, that clarified, that purified. The puros that was not flux but causes. The burning that was not the end but the transformation. And in the fire, the Lansdale agents, the advisors, the friends of the country, the partners of the people, who had loved the host nation, the beneficiary, the target group with the love that was penetration, the affection that was intervention, the solidarity that was subordination, the help that was hierarchy, the assistance that was the assertion of the superior, the capacity building that built only the capacity to be built, to be formed, to be shaped by the shaper. We cared. They cried in the flames, not burning, but being burned, not suffering, but being suffered. We cared deeply, personally, about the outcomes, the indicators. The lives improved, the poverty reduced, the development achieved. We gave our years, our energy, our expertise, ourselves. We were not the cold technicians, the neutral experts, the distant observers. We were engaged, committed, passionate. We loved our work. We loved the people. We loved the country. But the fire showed what the words obscured. The love was possession. The passion was penetration. The commitment was the refusal to let go. The engagement was the embedding, the nesting of the self in the other, the advisor in the advised, the foreign in the domestic, the global in the local, the best practice in the particular, the universal in the specific, the abstract in the concrete, the form in the matter, the mold in the molded. Aeneas-Quixote entered the fire, not reluctantly, but willingly, for he knew this fire had lived. This love had practiced this passion, had believed in the belief that his belief was helpful, that his help was love, that his love was gift. When it was only the gift that establishes, the obligation, the love that establishes, the debt, the help that establishes, the helplessness, the assistance that establishes. The assisted is the permanent recipient, the eternal beneficiary, the forever developing the never developed. The fire teaches the difference, Virgil Mutato said. From outside the flame, for he could not enter, having died before the lesson was complete. Between the love that possesses and the love that releases, between the passion that penetrates and the passion that accompanies, between the solidarity that speaks for and the solidarity that listens, between the help that does and the help that enables the doing, between the capacity building that builds the capacity of the builder, and the capacity building that builds the capacity of the self-building, the self-capacitating, the autonomous, the autonomous, the self-legislating. That is the condition of the freedom, the end of the assistance, the goal that is the elimination of the goal, the purpose that is the achievement of the purposeless, the help that is the end of helping. And in the fire, Aeneas-Quixote felt the burning away of the self that was not self, but only the role, the function, the position, the advisor that advised, the helper that helped, the expert that experted, the nested self that nested in the other, the penetrative that penetrated, the possessive that possessed, the lustful that lusted after the outcome, the impact, the result, the measurable, the attributable, the sustainable, the exit strategy that was only the entry into another, the perpetual motion of the helpful, the restless, the busy. And what remained when the burning was done was not the purified, the essential, the true self beneath the false, but only the capacity for the self-making, the autopoiesis, the becoming that was not becoming something, but only the becoming, the process without product, the journey without destination, the climbing that was the summit, the seeking that was the finding, the asking that was the answer.
Beyond the fire, the forest, the garden, the terraces, the mountain opened into a plain Epistemic of light. Not the light of the sun that sets and rises, not the light of the moon that waxes and wanes, but the light that is the light of the possible. The foes of the dunaton, the illumination of the not yet that is already here, already present, already the present of the presence. And in the center of the plain, the two trees, not the tree of knowledge and the tree of life, of the first garden, not the prohibition and the promise, but the tree of exit and the tree of voice, the exodos and the phone, the leaving and the speaking, the two that are one, the one that is two. Seen from different angles, the same tree, in different light, the clinamen that swerves, not away from but toward, not out of but into, the swerve that is not deviation but direction, not error but correction, not falling but rising. And between the trees, oh the trees seem double, Matilda Autonomia, not the guide like Virgil Mutato, not the incomplete, the conditional, the if only, but the threshold itself, the passage, the pile, the gate that is not gate, but only the moment of the passing, the instant of the transition, the now that is always now, always here, always the point of the swerve, the break, the new. She sang, and the singing was not song but speech, not speech but silence, not silence but the between of the sound and the meaning, the sign and the signified, the simian that is not the substitute but the presence that is not present but only without the ergon. You have climbed through the active, the working, the patient unbundling of the nested self, the pride that becomes humility, the envy that becomes solidarity, the wrath that becomes targeting, the sloth that becomes stillness, the avarice that becomes grounding, the gluttony that becomes local, the lust that becomes release. But the climbing is not done, the unbundling continues, the work persists. The mountain of the purgatory is not the mountain of the goal, but the mountain of the process, the eternal ascent that is not eternal because it ends, but because it is always beginning, always. The first step, the fresh start, the new morning of the new day that is not new, but only the same day seen differently, the same step taken again, the same work done again. The repetition that is not repetition, but only the spiral, the return at the higher level, the palindropos that is not the circle, but the helix, the rising that returns to the same place, but above, beyond, after. She took him by the hand, or he took hers. The distinction not clear, not important for the taking, was mutual, reciprocal, the antipapontos of the agents who are not agents, but only the acting, the praxis that is not practice, but only the doing, the drawn without the drama, the action without the actor, the effect without the cause, the swerve that swerves without the swerver, the clinamen that breaks without the breaker, the new that is new without the novelty, the change that changes without the changer, the revolution that revolves without the revolutionary, the transformation that transforms without the transformer. Here you must choose, she said, or the trees said, or the plain said, or the light said, the source of the saying not distinct from the saying, between the exit and the voice, the leaving and the speaking, the departure and the presence. But the choice is not choice, for they are the same. The exit that is the voice that is the exit. The leaving that speaks, the speaking that leaves, the swerve that is both, the break that is whole. And Aeneas-Quixote chose or was chosen, or the choosing happened without the chooser. The swerve occurred, the clinamen broke, the chain of the determination, the necessity. The structure that structured even the structuring, the nesting that nested even the nesting, the complexity that complexed even the complexing. And he was ready, or the readiness was him. For the third canto, the paradise, the paradisos, that was not garden but city, not nature but culture, not given but made, the making. That was the condition of the made, the poiesis. That was the condition of the poema, the creating. That was the condition of the creation, the autonomy. That was the condition of the self. The self, that was the condition of the autonomy. The circle that was not vicious but virtuous. The spiral that rose without end, without limit, without
without the limit. That was the condition of the unlimited, the bounded, the bounded, the boundless, the definition that defined the indefinite, the whole rose that was not horizon, but only the mark, the boundary, the term that was not termination, but only the terminus, the end that was the beginning, the talos that was the arch, the completion that was the commencement, the finishing that was the starting, the done that was the doing. Here ends the second canto, the Purgatorial of Unbundling, the soul of Aeneas-Quixote, having worked the act of transformation, having climbed through the terraces of the patient undoing, stands at the threshold of the third, having learned the lesson of the guide who cannot guide to the end, having found the guide who is not guide but only the threshold itself, the passage, the becoming before him opens the Paradiso of Autonomy, not the received but the constructed, not the given but the taken, made the spheres of the parallel, the nested alternatives, the unbundled complexity that is not managed but lived, not improved but replaced, not reformed but revolutionized, the permanent revolution that is the daily construction of the possible, the not yet that is always becoming the now, the here, the present of the presence, the gift of the given, the doron of the dosis, the grace of the gratuitous, the freedom of the autonomous, the eleutheria of the autos, the self that is not self but only the process of the self-making, the autopoiesis, the clinamen that swerves forever, the swerve that is the freedom that is the swerve, the break that breaks the chain that is broken, the broken that is whole, the whole that is breaking, the breaking that is making, the making that is the unmaking, the unmaking that is the making, the unbundling that bundles anew, the new that is always new, always now, always here, always the parent, the present of the presence, the gift of the given, the grace of the gratuitous, the end that is the beginning.
The Paradiso of Autonomy, invocation of the muse of the achieved, the constructed, the lived. Sing Calliope Autonomia of the ascent through the spheres. Not the ascent of the alone, the solitary hero, the exceptional individual who transcends the many, but the ascent of the together, the collective. The multitude that climbs as forest climbs toward light, each tree reaching, but the reaching together, making the canopy, the plagia, the horizontal, heaven that is not above but between, among, the paradise that is not place but relation, not destination but direction, not end but ongoing. Sing of the guide who is not guide, Beatrice Praxis, she who was lost and is found, not in the personal, not in the romantic, the individual salvation, but in the historical, the tradition, the memory of the future, the revolutionary project that seemed dead, buried, defeated, but was only waiting underground in the roots, in the rhizome, in the mycelium of the possible that connects. What appears separate the apparent individuals into the network, the web, the plexus of the becoming. Sing of the spheres that are not hierarchies, not the higher and lower, the superior and inferior, but the different, the diverse, the multiple mode of the unbundled, the unnested, the free. Each sphere a way of being, a form of life, a bios that is not competition but composition, not selection but connection, not survival of the fittest but the flourishing of the fitting, the appropriate, the oikios, the
homemaking that makes home not possession but relation.
Not property but propriety, the proper way
Of being in the world with others, for others I begin where the purgatory ended. At the stream, the lethe of the unlearning,
not the forgetting
of the inferno, not the amnesia of the trauma, but the active unlearning of the learning that was the barrier, the expertise that was, the ignorance, the knowledge that was the blindness. Aeneas-Quixote drank, and the drinking was not loss but gain, not emptiness but fullness, the fullness of the possible, the cleared space where the new might grow, the unbundled self might emerge from the chrysalis of the nested. And Beatrice Praxis appeared, not in the flesh, not in the appearance of the individual, but in the appearance of the collective,
the multitude, the swarm, the pathos that speaks with one voice,
because it is many voices,
the unity that is not uniformity
but unanimity,
the agreement that is not consensus
but resonance, the harmony that is not unison but polyphony. You have climbed through the denial of the self, she said. The purgatory of the unbecoming, the patient dismantling of the nested, the complex, the given. Now you must climb through the automation, the construction of the new, the building of the parallel, the alternative, the other. That is not opposition, but composition, not negation, but creation. The yes that is the other side of the no, the being that follows the non-being, the life that emerges from the death of the old, the new that is not new in time, but new in kind, the qualitatively, the qualitas that changes everything.
Sphere of the moon, immediate mutual aid. Here the inconstant found their place, not punished for the inconstancy, but celebrated for the fluid, the adaptable, the responsive, the ones who helped others, but could not help themselves consistently, who gave what they had when they had it, who received when they needed without ledger, without account. Without the nesting of the charitable, the philanthropic, the helping that helps only by maintaining the helplessness, the dependency, the condition of the help that requires the helper, the permanent asymmetry of the assistance, the aid that aids only by creating the need for more aid. This sphere was made of the temporary, the transient, the technologies of the moment, the mobile money that bypass the banks, the encrypted networks that bypass the surveillance, the community kitchens that bypass the market, the care webs that bypassed the institutions, the informal that was not informal, but only the unformed, the potential, the possible, that refused to congeal, to formalize, to become the institution that would replicate the nesting, the complexity that would become the trap. Here, Beatrice Praxis explained, the work is not to build the permanent, the lasting, the eternal, but to resist the permanent, to keep the temporary alive, to prevent the congealing, the freezing, the transformation of the flow into the structure. The mobile money platform that becomes the bank is not success but failure. The encrypted network that becomes the institution is not victory, but defeat. The task is to keep
And Aeneas-Quixote saw the souls of this sphere, not fixed in place like the spheres of Dante, not arranged in hierarchy, but moving, flowing, like the waters of a river, like the currents of the air, like the migrations of the birds, that are not lost, but only following paths, that are not paths, but only the going Hear the souls of the mimics, the pretenders, the ones who wore the mask of compliance, while building the alternative, who spoke the language of the master, while teaching the slaves to read, who implemented the program while subverting the purpose, who were the virus in the system, the parasite that feeds on the host until the host is transformed, not killed but changed, not destroyed but converted, the mimicry that becomes the mockery, the imitation that becomes the subversion, the strategic essentialism that is not essentialism, but only strategy, the temporary adoption of the form that is necessary to survive, the moment of the danger, the persecution, the surveillance that watches for the different, the deviant, the threatening, the alternative. You were one of these, Beatrice Praxis said, not consciously, not strategically, but effectively. Your advice was not what it appeared to be. Your assistance assisted more than you knew. The nested complexity you helped to build contained the seeds of its own unbundling. The contradictions that would eventually break the bonds, loosen the ties, create the openings for the exit, the voice, the choice. You were the unwitting agent of the change. You did not intend the tool of the purpose. You did not share. Now you must learn to retain, to choose the mimicry, to wear the mask consciously, to play the game while changing the rules, to be the Trojan horse, the gift that is not gift, but only the container of the soldiers who will seize the city. And Aeneas-Quixote saw among these souls the faces of the counterparts he had trained, the beneficiaries he had assisted, who had taken what he offered and made it into weapons, who had learned the language of the development and spoken it back, who had used the tools of the nested to unest, who had turned the checklists against the checklists, the metrics against the metrics, the monitoring against the monitors, the evaluation into the evocation of the possible, the invocation of the alternative. Hear the lovers of struggle, not the struggle of others. Not the solidarity of the distant, the abstract, the theoretical, but the struggle of the self, the body, the flesh that loves, the work of transformation, the labor of liberation, the arrows of the praxis, the desire that is not for the other as object, but for the other as subject, the co-subject, the together subject, the we that is not aggregation but relation, not sum but synergy, not combination, but composition, the love that makes the lovers into something new, something neither had been, the third that emerges from the two, the child that is not offspring but only the ongoing, the generation that is not reproduction, but production, the making of the new. And here he met the guerrilla poet, the singer of the grammar of the possible, the one who had taught him, in the world below, that language was not neutral, that the sentence was not innocent, that the syntax could be insurgent, the grammar, guerrilla, the word a weapon, a tool, a technology of the transformation, the technique of the poiesis, the making that is not production but creation, not the making of the same but the making of the different, the other, the new. You learned my lesson, the poet said, but learning is not enough. You must teach it, must sing it, must become the poet of the unbundling, the bard of the dismantling, the singer of the spheres you now ascend. For the epic is not entertainment, not distraction, not art for art's sake, but the technology of the soul, the tool of the transformation, the pharmacon that is both poison and cure, both the sickness and the healing, the recognition that is the beginning of the change, the anagnorisis that leads to the peripeteia, the reversal, the revolution that is the turning around, the metanoia of the individual and the collective. And they sang together, not in unison, but in harmony, the harmony of the different voices, the different rhythms, the different meters that make the music, the mosaic that is not entertainment, but education, the leading of the soul, the psyche, toward the good, the true, the beautiful, the kalon that is not aesthetic but ethical, not beauty, but goodness, the proper arrangement, the taxis that is not hierarchy, but only the fitting, the appropriate, the prepon of the parts to the whole to the parts. Sphere of the sun, the sages of unbundling. Here, the theologians of the transformation, the theorists of the dismantling, the thinkers of the exit, the voice, the loyalty, and the exit. The Hirschman of the spheres, the Fanon, the Mariotiki, the dependency theorists, the world systems analysts, the counter-Cleios practitioners, the ones who had mapped the nesting, traced the complexity, found the vulnerabilities, the points of leverage, the places where the pressure applied would break the bonds, not through force but through the strategic exploitation of the contradictions, the internal tensions that made the system unstable, the self-undermining dynamic of the imperial, the colonial,
the hegemonic, the nested. They formed a rose, Rodon, not the rose of Dante's paradise, the hierarchical. The ranked, they ordered from the highest to the lowest, but the rows of the concentric, the circles within circles, the petals that are not above or below, but beside, around, among, the multiplicity that is not many but one, the unity that is not one but many, the Henkai polar of the philosophers, the one and the many that are not opposed but only aspects of the same, the singular, plural, the plural, singular, the singular. Tantum, that is also the plural tantum. Here Beatrice Praxis said, the work is thought, but thought is action, theory is practice, the theoria that is not contemplation, but the highest form of activity, the seeing that is also the making, the vision that is also the construction, the utopian that is not nowhere but now here, the impossible that is only the not yet possible, the future in the present, the seed in the soil, the potential in the actual, the dynamis in the energia, the power that is not power over, but power to, the capacity to act, to make, to transform, to become. And Aeneas-Quixote studied with them, learned from them not the doctrine, the dogma, the fix and final truth, but the method, the approach, the way of asking, of questioning, of probing the assumptions, the nesting, the complexity that presented itself as necessity, as nature, as the way things are. The physics that was only the normals, the convention, the construction, the historical, the changeable, the transformable. Hear the warriors, not the warriors of conquest, not the Achilles of the Iliad, the killer of men, the taker of cities, the hero of the individual glory, the Cleos that is only the fame of the destroyer, but the warriors of the long struggle, the patient resistance, the ones who died in the dirty wars, the structural adjustments, the humanitarian interventions, the ones who were disappeared, tortured, killed not for what they had done, but for what they represented, the possibility of the alternative, the threat of the example, the danger of the proof that things could be different, that there is no alternative, was only the chant of the defeated, the mantra of the complicit, the spell of the nested. They formed a cross, staros, not the cross of the Christian sacrifice, the substitutionary atonement, the death that pays for the sin, but the cross of the strategic patience, the willingness to lose the battle for the war, to die for the cause that outlasts the individual, the generation, the particular moment, the cross that is not suffering for suffering's sake, but suffering for the sake of the transformation, the metamorphosis that requires the death of the old, the birth of the new, the labor that is the labor of the becoming. Here, Beatrice Praxis said, the work is memory, not the memory of the individual, the autobiography, the story of the self, but the collective memory, the historical memory, the memory of the class, the people, the nation, the multitude, the memory that is not nostalgia, not the longing for the past, but the weapon
guardian of the present, the tool of the future, the reminder of what has been done, what can be done, what must be done. The memento that is not mori but memento vivere. Remember to live, remember to struggle, remember to continue the work of the dead, the unfinished project, the revolution that is permanent, ongoing, the permanent revolution that is not Trotsky's, but only the recognition that the transformation is never complete, never finished, never done, but requires the constant vigilance, the constant renewal, the constant return to the beginning. The arch that is not origin, but only the starting point, the first step, the initial move that must be made again and again. And Aeneas-Quixote remembered not his own suffering, for he had suffered little, had been the advisor, the assistant, the helper, not the helped, the assisted, the victim, but the memory of those he had advised, those he had assisted, the suffering he had seen and not seen, known and not known, acknowledged and denied, the memory that was his responsibility, his debt, his obligation to the dead, the creos that must be paid, not with guilt, not with shame, but with work, with action, with the continuation of the struggle that they had begun, that he had interrupted, delayed, complicated, nested, but that now in this sphere, in this ascent, he must take up, must carry forward, must make his own. Here ends the first half of the third canto, the soul of Aeneas-Quixote having ascended through the spheres of the moon, Mercury, Venus, the sun, and Mars, having learned the practices of the temporary, the strategic, the erotic, the theoretical, and the memorial now approaches the higher spheres, Jupiter, Saturn, the fixed stars, the primordial, and finally the Empyrean, where the vision of the unbundled system, walking away from itself, awaits, where the rapid recognition of the center's hollow mass, and the protagonist's transformation into guide for the next cycle of unbundling will complete the epic, not with closure but with opening, not with end but with beginning, not with the final word but with the first word of the next telling, the next singing, the next unbundling of the nested, the complex, the given.
Hear the just, not just in the sense of the law, not the legal that was only the loyal, the compliant, the nested, the subordinate, but the just in the sense of the upright, the straight that is not straight in the line of the ruler, the measured, the calibrated, but straight in the spine, in the stance, in the refusal to bend, to bow, to kneel before the throne that was not their throne,
The crown that was not their crown,
the scepter that was not their scepter, the power that was not power over but power against power, to resist, to refuse, to say no, to exit. They formed letters, grammata, not fixed in stone like the law of the Medes, not immutable, unchangeable, eternal, but moving, rearranging, spelling different words in different moments.
dignity now,
Autonomy then,
sovereignty,
liberation,
people,
the words that were not words but only the breath of the meaning, the spirit of the letter, the living that lived in the speaking, the writing, the doing. Here stood Sankara the upright, the breathing.
fiery flame that burned so bright. In Burkina, the land of the upright, who vaccinated the children, fed the people, refused the debt, the nested, the complex, and died for the refusal, the exit. The voice that was too loud, too clear, too dangerous to those who nested in the shadows, the land-stale agents, the compradors, the treacherous friends. Here the Zapatistas, masked but visible, the partial, the incomplete, the ongoing, the no that was also the yes. No to the NAFTA. Yes to the autonomy. No to the state. Yes to the community. No to the global. Yes to the local, the double negative that was positive. The refusal that was also the construction, the unbundling that bundled anew, the different, the other, the possible. Here the Kerala model, incomplete, the education that educated, the health that healed, the land that was distributed, not concentrated, the social that was not subordinated to the economic, the human that was not reduced to the resource, the factor, the input in the production function. You are not rulers. Aeneas-Quixote spoke. You were anti-rulers. Unrulers, the rulers who ruled against ruling, who used the state to dismantle the state, the power to dissolve power, the office to close the office, the position to abolish position, the nested to unnest, the complex to simplify. And one who had been, who had ruled, answered from the moving letters. We failed, or seemed to fail, or failed to succeed in the terms of the success, the metrics of the measurable, the indicators of the development. We did not grow the GDP, did not attract the investment, did not improve the ranking, the doing business, the credit rating, the competitive, the global. But we succeeded in the terms that are not terms, the measures that are not measured, the success that is not success, but only the continuation, the persistence, the survival of the different, the other, the not this, the no. We refused, we exited, we spoke, and in the speaking, in the exiting, in the refusal, we found the justice that is not justice of the courts, the law of the nested, the complex, but the justice of the upright, the straight spine, the clear eye, the voice that does not tremble.
Sphere of Saturn. Beyond the letters, beyond the words. The sphere of stillness, of silence. Of the waiting that was not passivity, but the highest activity, the most. Intense engagement, the fullest presence, in the absence of the action, the deed. Here the patient, the long suffering, the generations who maintained what could not be maintained, who kept what could not be kept, who spoke what could not be spoken in the tongue that was not the tongue of the master, the language that was not the language of the report, the proposal, the plan. They spoke in proverbs, in parables, in the riddles that the consultants could not parse, the episteme.
that was not the episteme of the expert. The knowledge that was not knowledge in the sense of the documentable, the transferable, the scalable, the best practice, the lesson learned. They refused the census, the counting, the numbering that was the condition of the administration, the management, the governance that was not government, but only the nested, the complex, the control disguised as assistance. They maintained the oral, the spoken, the passed down, the inherited, the tradition that was not tradition. In the sense of the backward, the primitive, the pre-modern, the undeveloped, but traditional in the sense of the living, the continuous, the connected, the root that went down to the source, the spring that flowed from the depth. You did nothing, Aeneas-Quixote said, or thought, or began to say, but stopped. For he saw that the doing was not the only doing, that the action was not the only action, that the work included the waiting, the watching, the keeping, the maintaining, the being in the place, the staying, the remaining. When all called for departure, for exit, for the urban, the modern, the developed, and one who had waited, who had kept, spoke from the stillness, the silence.
We match their patience,
The imperial,
patience,
the structural patience. The long duration of the nested, the complex that outlasts the individual, the generation, the particular moment we outlasted by lasting, outwaited by waiting, out remained by remaining. The clinoman does not only swerve, it also persists, continues, endures. The break is not only the breaking, but also the holding, the keeping of what is broken, the fragments preserved until the new vessel, the new form, the new possibility. Hear the constellations, the asterisms, not the stars of the empire, the guiding lights of the navigation that brought the ships to the shore, the conquest, the extraction, the nested, the complex, but the stars of the alternative, the other way, the different path, the proof that the proof was possible. Hear Cuban medicine, the international, the doctors who went where the doctors would not go, the plague, the disaster, the blockade, the siege, the war. Not for profit, not for payment, not for the market, the exchange, the quid pro quo, the conditionality, but for the solidarity, the gift, the doron that establishes no debt, no obligation, no binding, no nesting. Hear the water wars of Cochabamba, the people who took back the water, the commons that was commoned again, the private that was made public, the enclosure that was reversed, the unbundling that bundled the people, the community, the us, the we. Here, the temporary autonomous zones, the ZAS, the occupations, the communes that lasted long enough, that proved the proof, that showed the showing, that demonstrated
the demonstration.
Not models to copy,
Not templates.
not best practices to transfer,
Scale up.
replicate mainstream, but proofs that copying was not needed. And each must find its own path, its own swerve, its own clinamen, its own break with the determined, the necessary, the structured, the nested.
They failed.
The voice of the expert,
Spoken Aeneas-Quixote.
the old voice,
The voice of the advisor.
the assistant.
They did not last, did not scale, did not replicate, did not become the system.
The new system.
The replacement.
But Beatrice Praxis answered, the guide who was not guide, but only the going.
They did not fail, they succeeded in succeeding.
They proved the proving, the point was not the permanence, the duration,
The sustainability,
in the sense of the eternal,
the lasting,
the forever,
the always,
the all-time. The point was the possibility,
the showing that the showing was possible.
the demonstration
Was possible.
proof that proof was possible. The alternative that alternatives were possible.
The other, that the other existed.
The no,
That the no could be spoken. The exit,
could be taken.
the voice.
That the voice could be heard.
They are not models.
They are not maps.
They are not guides.
They are not paths.
They are the proof that paths exist.
That maps can be drawn.
The guides
Can emerge
that models can be made.
and unmade.
That the making is the point, not the made.
The process.
Not the product,
The becoming.
not the become, the verb.
Not the noun.
The gerund.
Here the swiftest, the first moved, the source of the moving
Itself, not the moved, but the mover. Not the beings, but the becomings. Not the things, but the processes. Not the nouns, but the verbs. Not the subjects, but the actions. Not the agents, but the agencies. Hear the movements, the kinemata, the decolonizations, the revolutions, the transformations, the unbundlings. Not as things that were, that happened,
That occurred in the past, the history, the completed, the finished, the done.
but as things that are, that happen.
That occur in the present, the now.
The ongoing, the continuous, the permanent.
They had no faces,
For they were not persons, not individuals, not subjects, not agents.
they had no forms,
For they were not objects,
not things, not substances, not entities.
they were the moving itself, the becoming,
The decolonizing, the revolutionizing,
the transforming, the unbundling.
the verbs without subjects, the actions
Without actors, the effects without causes, the clinamen,
that swerved without swerver,
the break that broke without breaker,
the new that was new without novelty, the change that changed without changer.
You are the angels.
Aeneas-Quixote spoke.
The messengers, the angeloi, the ones who announce, who declare, who make known the unknown, the possible, the not yet.
And the moving censored, not in voice but in moving, not in speech but in swerving.
We are not angels,
We are not messengers.
we are the message itself,
The announcement itself, the
making known
that is the known,
the declaration.
and the become is becoming.
Beyond the moving, beyond the swerving, the stillness that was not stillness, but only the moving so fast, so complete, so total that it seemed to stop. The motion that was not motion, but only the rest so deep, so full, so absolute that it seemed to move. Hear the rose, rode on, not the rose of Dante's paradise, the hierarchical, the rank, the ordered from highest to lowest, the blessed arranged by their blessedness, their merit, their virtue, their grace, their worth. But the rose of the unbundled, the unnested, the uncomplexed, the simple that was not simple, in the sense of the primitive, the backward, the undeveloped, but simple in the sense of the unbundled, the separated, the distinguished, the clear, the transparent, the visible. And at the center, not the throne, not the seat, not the chair, not the place where the one sat, who commanded, who ordered, who ruled, who governed, who nested, the all in the one, the many in the few, the complex in the simple, the whole in the part, the universe in the point. At the center, the procession, the pomp, the march, the going, the leaving, the exit, the departure, the unbundled system walking away from itself, the nested complex, dismantling its own nesting, the complex becoming simple, the bundled becoming unbundled, the bound becoming free. Aeneas-Quixote saw, and seeing was the seeing that was not sight, but understanding, not vision, but recognition, not observation, but participation, the anagnosis that was also the peripetia, the recognition that was the reversal, the turning that was the return, but not the return to the same, the origin, the beginning, the archie, but the return to the different, the other, the new, the possible. He saw that the superstate was always already dismantling itself, that the nested complexity created the vulnerabilities that became the exit routes, the voice paths, the loyalty breaks, the alternative, the counter in counter-clios was never opposition but acceleration, not resistance but assistance to the internal contradictions, the self-undermining dynamic, the imperial that imperialized itself to death, the colonial that colonized itself to exhaustion, the hegemonic that hegemonized itself to collapse. He saw that the center was hollow, that the beast at the frozen lake was not evil but only structure, not fallen but founded, not devil but design, not malicious but only mathematical, only the aggregation of the rational that made the irrational whole, the general madness that was the sum of the same decisions. And he saw that the unbundling was not his work, not the work of the guide, the advisor, the assistant, not the work of the hero, the protagonist, the exceptional individual who transcended, who overcame, who conquered, who won. The unbundling was the work of the many, the multitude, the collective, the together, the we that was not we, but only the I that was not I, the self that was not self, but only the process of the self-making, the autopoiesis, the becoming that was not becoming something, but only the
process, without product, the journey, without destination, the climbing. That was the summit, the seeking, that was the finding.
The return. Aeneas-Quixote becomes guide, and Beatrice Praxis spoke the last words. The final teaching, the ultimate lesson. You have ascended through the spheres, not as conquest, but as unbundling. Not as accumulation, but as dispersal. Not as gathering, but as giving. Not as knowing, but as unknowing. Not as becoming, but as unbecoming. You have learned the temporary, the strategic, the erotic, the theoretical, the memorial, the just, the patient, the proven, the moving, the still, the simple. You have drunk from the lethe of the unlearning, the active, forgetting of the expertise that was the barrier to knowledge. Now you must become the guide, not for another ascent, for there is no other ascent, no higher, no further, no beyond, no more. But for the next cycle, the return, the descent, the going back down. The catabasis, that is the condition of the anabasis. The down, that is the condition of the up. The death, that is the condition of the life. The ending, that is the beginning. You must write the poem we have spoken in the language that is neither English nor your mother tongue, neither the tongue of the master nor the tongue of the slave, neither the nested nor the unbundled, but the Creole of the between. The pigeon of the transition, the dialect of the becoming, the idiom of the not yet, the speech of the possible. And Aeneas-Quixote took up the stylus, the pen, the tool, the technology of the recording, the making, the poiesis that was not production, but creation, not the making of the same, but the making of the different, the other, the new. He wrote the first lines of the poem, the epic we have just heard, the song we have just sung, the tale we have just told, in the language of the between, the grammar of the possible, the syntax of the unbundled, the vocabulary of the free. He wrote of the descent, the circles, the terraces, the spheres, the unbundling. The bundles are new. The new that is always new, always now, always here, always. The paron, the present of the presence, the gift of the given, the grace of the gratuitous, the end, that is the beginning, the finishing, that is the starting, the done, that is the doing, the making, that is the unmaking, that is the making, the clinomen, that swerves forever, the swerve, that is the freedom, that is the swerve, the break, that breaks the chain, that is broken, the broken, that is whole, the whole, that is breaking, the breaking, that is making, the making, that is the unbundling. Here ends the unbundling. an epic in 3 canticles, the soul of Aeneas-Quixote having ascended. Through all the spheres having learned, the practices of the temporary, the strategic, the erotic, the theoretical, the memorial, the just, the patient, the proven, the moving, the still, the simple, having become the guide who guides not to the end, but to the beginning, having written. The poem that is the poem of the writing stands at the threshold of the next ascent, the next cycle, the next unbundling. For the work is never done, the revolution
never completed, the transformation never finished, the unbundling never finally unbundled, the nested never fully unnested, the complex never completely simplified, the bundle never entirely unbundled.
but in the ongoing, the continuing, the persistent, the stubborn, the patient work of generations.
In the clinamen that swirls forever in the swirl,
That is the freedom, there is the joy,
the pleasure, the happiness, the eudaimonia
of the autonomous, the self-making, the autopoietic, the free. Sing Calliope autonomia of the next
ascent, the next descent, the next
cycle of the
unbundling, the next generation of the free, the next
moment of the possible,
the next
now of the present,
the next
here of the presence,
the next
gift of the given,
the next
grace of the gratuitous. Sing forever, for the singing is the song.
The singer is the song, the telling is the told, the epic is the endless is the now is the here is the present is the gift is the given is the grace is the free is the swerve is the clinamen is the break is the new is the becoming is the being is the doing is the making is the unmaking is the making is the unbundling is the bundling anew, the new is always new, always now, always here, always the parent,
The present of the presence, the gift of the given, the grace of the gratuitous, the end that is the beginning, that is the end, the alpha, that is the omega, the first that is the last, that is the first, the unbundling that bundles anew, the bundle
that unbundles forever.
Thus he spoke, and they all became silent in quietness.